Everyone, so today we're going to dig into some numbers coming out of Canada that honestly tell a really surprising story. It's a story about a massive fundamental shift happening in the country's economy, its job market, and its whole approach to immigration. And it all starts with one kind of small-looking number.
So this is the number I'm talking about, negative 14,954. Now on its own, it might not seem like a huge deal, but in context, this is an absolute bombshell. After years and years of explosive growth, the flow of temporary workers and students into Canada has suddenly and dramatically reversed. And to really get your head around how dramatic this is, just look at this comparison. In the year just before, Canada added over 750,000 temporary residents. That is massive growth. To go from that to a net loss, well, that's not just tapping the brakes. That is a full-on screeching U-turn in national policy.
So that's the big question, right? Why? Why did a country that's literally built on immigration suddenly slam the brakes so hard? Well, the answer isn't just one simple thing. It's actually a really complex story about the changing value of education, a deep mismatch in the job market, and a crisis that's been brewing under the surface for years. Okay, so the first big piece of this puzzle is what we can call the credentials crisis. It's this growing realization that a university degree, which for generations was seen as the key to a good career, just isn't the golden ticket it once was.
And that brings us right to this concept called degree inflation. It works just like regular inflation. The more degrees there are floating around, the less each individual one is actually worth in the job market. And so employers start demanding higher and higher qualifications for jobs that haven't actually gotten any more complex.
Want a perfect example of this in action? Just look at what it takes to become a physical therapist. Back in the 80s, a bachelor's degree was all you needed. Simple enough. By the 90s, that expectation had shifted to a master's. And today, a doctorate is often the required entry-level degree. The actual job hasn't fundamentally changed, but the credentials needed have just crept up and up and up.
So what's the real-world result of all this? Well, it's pretty stark. Some research from the New York Federal Reserve Bank found that about a third of all university grads end up underemployed. They're working in jobs that simply don't require the degree they spent years and a whole lot of money to get. Okay, so let's move on to the second major issue, and you'll see how this all connects. We're talking about the widening skills gap. This is a massive economy-wide mismatch between the jobs Canada actually needs filled and the kind of training the workforce is getting.
And, this isn't some abstract problem for economists to debate. The Conference Board of Canada actually put a number on it. This skills gap is costing the economy a staggering $2.6 billion every single year. That's real value being lost because the right people just aren't there for the right jobs.
The root of the problem becomes crystal clear when you look at these numbers. So between 2018 and 2023, Canada issued almost 800,000 study permits for students in business programs. Now, during that exact same time, it issued less than 32,000 for healthcare and only 36,000 for trades. We've been training a massive number of people for fields with low demand while basically ignoring these critical shortages.
And here it is. This is the heart of the mismatch. 2/3 of the vacant jobs that need formal training don't require a university degree. They need college diplomas and trade certifications. The economy is practically screaming for people with practical, hands-on skills, but the education system has been looking the other way. And these shortages are hitting sectors that affect every single one of us. Right now, healthcare is facing over 80,000 vacancies for nurses and support staff. And construction, the very industry we need to solve the housing crisis, is about to lose a fifth of its entire workforce to retirement. It needs to find 250,000 new young workers just to keep pace.
So you've got this perfect storm of degree inflation and a massive skills gap, and it seems like it's finally reached a boiling point. And in response, we're seeing a really powerful shift from both policymakers and, the Canadian public.
So from the top down, the federal government has started pulling some major policy levers. They've put a national cap on study permits, they've restricted work permits for the spouses of many students, and they've tightened up the rules for getting work permits after graduation. They are actively trying to realign the whole system. And it's not just the government. Public thinking is shifting dramatically to match. When Canadians were asked what path they'd recommend to a young person, 56%, a clear majority, said skilled trades or an apprenticeship. Only 26% recommended a university program. That's a more than 2-to-1 margin. It shows you that old stigma against the trades is just rapidly falling apart. So what happens when you combine all these powerful forces, the big policy changes, the real economic needs, and this huge shift in public opinion? Well, what you get is a massive nationwide reshuffle. The entire calculus of who comes to Canada and what they do when they get here is being rewritten as we speak.
And this reshuffle is not happening evenly across the country. Not at all. Traditional hubs like Toronto and Vancouver are seeing tens of thousands of temporary residents leave. But at the exact same time, cities like Montreal, Calgary, and Edmonton are seeing significant gains. It's like a national rebalancing act, playing out in real time.
So what we're witnessing is what we're calling the Great Canadian Reshuffle. It's not just a single policy change or a single trend. No, it's a fundamental reevaluation of who Canada invites in, what skills are truly valued, and ultimately, how the country is going to build its future economy.
Which leaves us with one last really big question to think about. Is this great reshuffle the tough but necessary fix that's going to solve Canada's skills crisis and build a stronger economy? Or, by trying to fix one set of problems, are we just creating a whole new set of challenges that we haven't even begun to understand?